Good evening. I'm deeply honored to be joining the roster of previous recipients of the ADFL Distinguished Achievement Award. I've worked with many of them over the years, and they've made their mark in the teaching of modern foreign languages in the United States. Not I hesitate to admit. I have one course in classical Chinese under my belt, which I taught over 40 years ago. But I hope that my meager record belies my commitment to the profession. When I was in grade school, I wanted to be an interpreter at the United Nations, but that was not because I'd been raised to be bilingual. My immigrant parents spoke Chinese to each other, but their well-meaning desire to ensure their children's assimilation into American culture meant that they only spoke English to us. So I had to learn Chinese the hard way and much later, starting my senior year in college and continuing at Middlebury and then in Taiwan. In the meantime, I'd studied French and Latin, learned some Dutch as an exchange student one summer, and added German in college. But Chinese became my main focus because I had come to love poetry. What more venerable a poetic tradition was there than China's? And among literary genres, what requires more attention to language than poetry? Like all of us, I soon discovered that learning a language does more than provide access to texts. It is a gateway to other ways of thought and expression, to other cultures, and ultimately to one's own self. Languages are both the building blocks and the epitome of the humanities. If the humanities help us understand what distinguishes us as individuals, as well as what unites us, by asking fundamental questions about how humans feel, think, interact, and express themselves, language is both the instrument of these studies and the test case in its embodiment at once of both difference and commonality. Believing in the mission of the humanities means fighting for language instruction, and fight one must. Foreign language programs are the leading edge of the perennial crises in the humanities, first to be targeted as costly and thus unnecessary because of their small classes and resistance to aggregation. I learned this first as founding chair of the Department of East Asian Languages and Literatures at UC Irvine, and I took the struggle to the next level as Dean of Humanities at UCLA, a position I held for 10 years. Why administration, I was asked? My glib answer was that a bureaucratic career was the only one scholars in pre-modern China aspired to, and the ability to compose poetry was even tested on the civil service examination. But the challenges then were deadly serious. In the early 90s, the UC system had just gone through 3 rounds of budget cuts, and it was my job to implement the 4th. Surely some of the 90-plus languages then taught in the humanities at UCLA could be eliminated, but I found other ways to save resources and ended up adding a few more languages to the list to boot. From UCLA, it was a logical move to the presidency of ACLS, whose century-old commitment to supporting the humanities was dear to my heart. ACLS embraced from its very beginnings the study of other cultures, and language learning was fundamental to this mission. In its early decades, it established programs in Chinese, Japanese, Latin American and Slavic studies, and Native American languages. It also set up intensive training courses in 26 critical languages during World War II. These last responded, of course, to the strategic argument for the importance of language learning, one which resurfaced after Sputnik and 9/11 as well. But ACLS has also always been committed to the long view. Higher education is an aquifer, not a spigot. As former MLA President Mary Louise Pratt pointed out, deep knowledge of particular parts of the world cannot be produced overnight. It has to be built up over years, supported through real relationships with people and institutions abroad, and valued in terms independent of the fears and passions of a moment. As the largest of ACLS's member societies, MLA itself is one of the most important examples of and advocates for these networks and this knowledge. The day I drafted these remarks in December, there was both bad news and good news. The bad news, yet another university announced the termination of 12 low enrollment majors, 9 of which were in foreign languages and area studies. The good news, 5 distinguished academies in the United States, Britain, Canada, and Australia joined together for the first time in their histories to call for increased investment in language education to support both the diversity of languages spoken within their borders and greater access to learning others. So there is hope. And there is a lesson to be taken from the Legislative Assembly of Ontario in Toronto, here not far from where we should have been meeting tonight. When ACLS was last in the city, one of my colleagues bought a souvenir coffee mug featuring the Assembly's coat of arms and its very admirable motto, Audi Alteram Partem, Listen to the other side. This is one of the many things language learning enables us to do, and it's useful advice for governance, whether of a learned society, province, or nation. Thank you.